Hello and welcome back to the Limitless Performer Podcast, the podcast where we talk about well-being in the performing arts, because being your best on stage starts with looking after yourself off stage. Today's episode is about identity in musical theatre and how the lines can sometimes blur between performing being who you are and just what you do. So I wanted to start today's episode by going back a little to the time before performing became a job for me, before auditions, before industry talk. So that means going back to my dance classes after school. That was my happy place. After a long day of being the quiet, the shy one at school, I'd walk into the studio and everything would shift. The smell of hairspray and hair gel in the changing rooms, the sound of tap shoes on the floor, and the little key rings shaped like point shoes on my bag. That was my world. There was something so magical about it. The matching leotards and the excitement of graduating to a new colour ribbon on your character skirt. Learning to do makeup from the older girls and the inside jokes that you had with your friends. It felt like this tiny universe where I belonged completely, and honestly, that love never went away. I'm so grateful to my dance school for giving me those memories. When I went to drama school full-time, I loved it. I don't ever want to discredit that joy. The friends I made, the growth, the experiences, those are moments that shaped me. But when I got there, I threw myself in completely. I went to the library every day to borrow musical DVDs so I could keep watching shows and learning after class. I lived with course mates, so even at home the conversations were all about training, auditions, or dream roles. I even worked front of house in a theatre, so my job also revolved around performing. And in my free time, I was listening to cast albums, rewatching old show recordings, bootlegs, or scrolling through videos of people performing. Other than being a total stagey nerd, which I still proudly am, I can now see how much of my identity was tied to that one thing, being a musical theatre performer. It wasn't just what I did, it was who I was. And then, when I left drama school and I didn't get a job straight away, it hit me hard. I suddenly didn't know who I was without performing. It was like everything I'd built my sense of self around had gone quiet, and I didn't know how to fill that silence. So today, that is what we're unpacking. What happens when performing stops being something you do and starts being who you are? Because while that passion is beautiful, it can also become consuming, and sometimes that passion needs boundaries. You know that phrase you hear in training, you have to live and breathe it. It's said like a badge of honour, as if the only way to succeed in the industry is to make performing your entire world. And for a lot of us, especially when we're in that early stage of training, that's exactly what we do. You start reading plays at the weekends to find the perfect monologues. You spend hours scouring through cast recordings and obscure scores to find a song that no one else will bring into acting through song. You go to class, you rehearse, you watch other people perform, and then you go home and talk about performing with your flatmates because, of course, they're all performers too. It becomes the air you breathe, your community, your hobbies, your conversations. They all orbit around that same centre. And in a way that can be really beautiful. You're surrounded by people who get it, who understand what it means to work hard for something creative, something uncertain, something that lights you up. But that total immersion can also quietly blur the line between what you do and who you are. And when that happens, validation starts to come from one place, your work. You feel proud when you get a recall, crushed when you don't. You start measuring your worth in contracts, callbacks, feedback, roles. It's not intentional, it just happens, little by little, until your sense of self becomes dependent on external approval. Here's the thing though, when performing becomes your whole identity, rejection stops feeling professional. It feels personal. It's no longer, I didn't get that job, it's, I'm not good enough. And that's such a dangerous spiral, because in this industry, rejection isn't rare, it's built into the process. So if every no chips away at who you are, you're constantly rebuilding your self-worth from scratch. I remember when I finished drama school, that in-between space where you've graduated, you've trained for years, and now suddenly you're out there, waiting for the phone to ring. I didn't get a job straight away, and it felt like the ground dropped out beneath me. I'd spent years introducing myself as a performer, identifying as one, structuring my entire day around being one. And suddenly, without the work to hold on to, I felt completely lost. It wasn't just, I don't have a job right now. It was, who am I if I'm not performing? And that's such a disorienting place to be, because it forces you to realize how fragile your identity becomes when it's tied to something so external, something you can't always control. We all crave purpose and belonging. We all want to feel like we're a part of something that matters. But performing can become so all-encompassing that we forget the other parts of ourselves that make us whole. So I want to ask you something. And if you're listening on a walk or on the train, just let this sit with you for a moment. If you took performing away tomorrow, who would you be? What else lights you up beyond the stage, beyond the studio, beyond the next audition? Because here's what I've learned. When you start to nurture those other parts of yourself, you don't lose your passion for performing. You actually deepen it. You bring more life, more perspective, more grounding to your work. And that's where the healthiest, most sustainable artistry lives. Not in obsession, but in balance. So, why does this happen? Why do so many of us, especially in the performing arts, end up fusing who we are with what we do? It's not just about passion. There's actually some really interesting psychology behind it. There's a concept called identity fusion, which basically means your personal identity, who you are, becomes intertwined with a group, a role, or activity that feels meaningful to you. For performers, that fusion makes total sense. Performing isn't just a job, it's expressive, emotional, communal. It's how we communicate, connect, and make sense of the world. So when something feels that powerful, it's easy for it to become the foundation of your entire sense of self. And then you add in the environment. From the moment you start training, the system encourages that fusion. You spend long hours in studios and rehearsal rooms, working towards the same goals, surrounded by the same people, evaluated every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. You get feedback on your body, your voice, your energy, your potential. It's constant reflection and adjustment. And while that can make you grow as an artist, it also quietly sends a message. You are your work. Even outside of school or training, the world reinforces it. Your family asks, any auditions coming up? Your old friends say, oh, are you performing anywhere at the moment? You become the theatre person in your hometown, the one that everyone associates with singing, dancing, acting. And the label sticks. It becomes part of how people see you, and eventually how you see yourself. And then there's the industry itself. The performing arts are beautiful, but they're also built on visibility. You get cast, you book a job, people see you, people talk about you, they celebrate you. And then suddenly when you're not visible, when you're between contracts or taking time out, it can feel like you've disappeared. The unspoken message is, your value lies in how often you're working. And even if no one says that directly, you start to internalize it. You start measuring your worth by your booking rate, your CV, your online presence. And speaking of online, Social media has taken that pressure to a whole new level. It's no longer about who's getting work in your circle. It's about seeing hundreds of performers online sharing highlight reels, opening night posts, rehearsal footage. And even if you're genuinely happy for them, it's so hard not to compare. It's hard not to think, they're working and I'm not, or they're progressing faster than me. Comparison culture amplifies that identity fusion because your sense of self gets so tangled up in the constant measuring, likes, followers, bookings, visibility. And let's be honest, it's exhausting. When every part of your world, your friends, your feed, your mentors, they all reflect the same industry back at you, it's no wonder it starts to feel like performing is your whole life. But here's the key. None of this makes you weak or overly sensitive. It's actually a completely human response to an environment that constantly rewards performance, both literally and emotionally. So if you've ever felt like you've lost yourself in it all, or that you don't quite know who you are outside of the next show or audition, please know there is nothing wrong with you. It just means you've cared deeply about something for a very long time. And now the work is learning how to hold on to that passion without letting it consume all of you. So let's talk about the cost of losing yourself. Because when your entire identity is built around being a performer, it doesn't just shape how you work, it shapes how you live. And often that comes at a price. Firstly, there is emotional burnout, when your self-worth depends on external validation, like a casting, a callback, even a compliment. You end up living in a constant state of emotional tension. You're always waiting for the next yes because that tells you you're enough. When the answer is no, or worse, silence, or worse, you don't quite fit the puzzle, it feels personal. You can't switch off because rest feels like regression. You feel guilty for taking a weekend off, for missing one class, for not doing enough. But here's the paradox. The more you chase validation, the further away your peace gets. Then there's physical burnout. We push our bodies hard in this industry. Rehearsals, gym sessions, dance classes, just training. Often there's no off switch. You ignore the little twinge in your knee because there's a show coming up. You skip a rest day because you're terrified of losing momentum. And slowly you start to believe that pain is normal, that exhaustion is the standard, that your worth is tied to how much you can endure. But your body can only carry that for so long. Eventually it catches up in injuries, in fatigue, in that deep tiredness that no amount of sleep fixes. And then isolation creeps in. When every friend, every conversation, every thought revolves around performing, you lose connection to everything else that makes you you. It's not that your community is wrong, it's that it can become your only community. And that means when you hit a rough patch, or when the work slows down, you're left with very few places to refill your cup. And that leads to what I call the crash. The moment during the in-between phases, the injury, the contract gap, the post-show come down, where you suddenly don't know who you are without the next job to focus on. The stillness feels unbearable because you've built your whole identity on being busy, being seen, being someone. And when the curtain falls, even just for a season, it can feel like you've disappeared with it. That's the real cost of losing yourself. Not just the exhaustion, but the emptiness that follows. When the applause fades and you're sitting in the quiet, you realize how few parts of your life exist for just you. And I say this with love. That realization isn't failure. It's an invitation. It's your sign to start rebuilding from the inside out, because you deserve a life that's full, even when you're not So here is the reframe that changed everything for me. Performing is part of who I am, not all of who I am. It sounds simple, but for so many of us, that's quite a radical shift. Because for years, I thought my identity was performing. If I wasn't dancing, singing, or acting, then who even was I? But the truth is, performing is something you do, something you love, something that brings you to life. But it's not the entirety of your existence. It's one beautiful piece in a much bigger mosaic. So how do you start creating that separation in a healthy way, without losing the passion that makes you so good at what you do? Firstly, diversify your sources of joy. Start by asking, what else makes me feel alive? Is it reading, writing, running, cooking, spending time outdoors, traveling, learning something new? When you fill your life with multiple sources of meaning, you stop asking performing to be everything, your joy, your purpose, your validation. You start letting it be something beautiful, not everything essential. Secondly, stay curious outside your field. As artists, curiosity is one of our biggest superpowers, but it often gets trapped inside the studio or the rehearsal room. Try learning something that has nothing to do with performing. Psychology, photography, business, sport, language, anything. You'll be amazed at how much that curiosity actually feeds your artistry too. Thirdly, connect with people outside the industry. This one can be hard when your social world is all performers. I used to want just performer friends, a lovely tenor boyfriend, but having friends who aren't in the arts really gives you perspective. It keeps you grounded, reminds you of life beyond the next audition, and helps you remember that your worth doesn't hinge on the spotlight. You start to see yourself as a person who performs, not a performer who just happens to be human. Fourth, move your body for support, not punishment. This one's been huge for me. Training, whether it's strength, running, or any kind of movement, became my way to feel strong beyond aesthetics or roles. Personally, I love running because there are no mirrors. There's no competition, no casting, no look that I have to fit. It's just me, the road, and my own progress. That's where I started rebuilding self-trust, not from how I looked or what roles I booked, but from how I felt in my own body. Next, value yourself beyond outcomes. You are still enough even when you're not performing. Even when the job doesn't come through, even when the applause isn't there, your value isn't tied to a role, a credit, or a label. It's in your humanity, your kindness, your growth, your willingness to keep showing up. For me, finding purpose in other areas, coaching, education, and well-being was a huge turning point. It reminded me that I'm allowed to hold many identities, that I can be creative, curious, connected, whether or not I'm on the stage. And honestly, that expansion made me fall back in love with performing again. Because it wasn't the thing that defined me, it became the thing that expressed me. So maybe that's where we land today. You don't have to let go of your passion, you just have to let it take its rightful place. Performing can still be your heartbeat. It just doesn't have to be your entire pulse. So let's bring this conversation down to earth. How do we actually live this reframe? How do we start to loosen our grip on the idea that performing is our entire identity without losing our love for it? I want to give you a few simple, reflective tools to start with. Nothing overwhelming, just small shifts that can make a huge difference. 1. Identity mapping. Grab a notebook or even just the Notes app on your phone. Draw a big circle and in the middle write who I am. Then around it, start adding all the parts of you that exist outside of performing. Maybe it's friend, sibling, coach, creative, partner, reader, runner, dog mum, foodie, traveller. See performing as one beautiful piece of that whole picture, not the entire thing. It's amazing how grounding it feels when you see yourself as a full, multi-dimensional human again. 2. The non-performing joy list. Write down 5 things that make you feel alive, that have absolutely nothing to do with performing. Maybe it's walking by the sea, baking, journaling, spending time with your friends, painting, listening to music that isn't a cast album. Commit to doing one of those things this week. It doesn't have to be big or fancy, just something that reconnects you with life beyond the rehearsal room. You'll be surprised how much that little pocket of joy fills your cup for when you do go back into work or training. 3. The post-audition reset. We're so conditioned to evaluate ourselves with how did I do? What if instead you ask, how am I feeling? Because your well-being is just as valid a measure of progress as your performance. No, your well-being won't pay the bills, but the tiny shift in language helps you separate you, the person, from you, the performer. It builds self-compassion, and that's what allows you to sustain this career long-term. 4. Create digital balance. Look at your social media feed. What is it filled with? If every post you see is a casting announcement, show reel, or highlight reel, it can subtly reinforce the idea that your worth comes from doing and not being. Try curating your feed with a little more balance. Follow accounts that inspire you as a person, not just as a performer. Well-being pages, nature photography, slow living, psychology, books, things that remind you there's more to life than the next performing role. It's not about disconnecting from the industry. It's about protecting your relationship with it. If you are listening to this and realizing that performing has been your whole world, please don't judge yourself for that. You were taught that that's what dedication looks like, but true sustainability in this career comes from expansion, not restriction, from letting yourself be a whole human, not just a performer trying to keep up. The goal isn't to care less, it's to care more wisely. Performing is such a beautiful part of who you are, but it's not the whole story. And that's the heart of today's episode. When you make space for the other parts of yourself, the friend, the learner, the curious human who exists beyond the stage, your art doesn't disappear. It actually grows deeper, richer, and so much more sustainable. Because you're not performing from emptiness, you're performing from wholeness. So this week, I would love for you to take a moment and reflect on this question. Who am I beyond performing? Maybe even share it with me over on Instagram at Limitless Performing. I honestly love hearing your reflections, and it's always such a reminder that we're all figuring this out together. And if you know someone who might need this conversation, maybe a course mate, a colleague, or a friend between contracts, please send this episode their way. These chats really come alive when they're shared. Next week, we're diving into something that every performer struggles with at some point. Careers beyond the stage, how it's skipped over in training, and why it's such a crucial part of your performance and well-being. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Limitless Performer Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait to chat again next week. Until then, take care of yourself, not just your craft.